The Persona franchise is probably the most popular JRPG at this current time. I believe that these series of games have finally overthrown the dynasty of Final Fantasy when it comes to the pedestal of popularity. Even if you don't like turn-based combat, chances are you've still probably played this game, or at least know a lot about it. The gigantic footprint this left on the gaming industry is something to marvel, and Atlas will keep trying to do their best just to keep that reputation from disappearing. The hype for their next Persona project is starting to build up, and the new IP that they just made is being heralded as Fantasy Persona done right. Talks of remaking the first two games are also starting to pop up now, and I think that's only really possible because of how successful Persona 3 Reload's launch really was. On an outsider's perspective, this might just be a cause for celebration, but if you've been a fan of Persona 3 since the very beginning and have been in the community for long enough, then you would know how contentious this remake really was. Persona 3 will always be my favorite Persona game, but that sentiment is only true if I were to judge it by combining all of its versions into one, because even with 3 remakes and 4 freaking movies, I can safely say that none of the current versions of the game are the best versions of themselves. Whatever version of the game you might play, you will always be missing something crucial to what makes this entry so special to begin with, and I think that just sucks. The discourse of which version of the game is the best one has never been this contentious before. We've seen hundreds of games at this point get remakes and remasters, but no matter how troubling it got, the winner seems to be pretty goddamn obvious most of the time. We've seen times where the remake is by far the better version of the game, with Resident Evil 1 and 2, Risk of Rain Returns, Star Ocean 2, Yakuza Kiwami, and I heard that the Crisis Core remake does this too. But we also have plenty of examples of the remake or the remaster missing the mark or just being an inferior version compared to the original. Games like Silent Hill 2 HD Collection, the GTA Remastered Trilogy, and Persona 2 Innocent Sin. I swear I almost dropped Innocent Sin with how brain dead that PSP port was. Like, holy auto Pegasus spam, this just clears the whole game. But anyway, tangents aside, there are some that are more debatable than others, like the Final Fantasy VII Remake or Black Mesa. But the reason why Persona 3 is a different breed compared to those games is because this game has been remade 4 times and has a series of movies. There has been so many chances to make the ultimate Persona 3 Reload Fest portable golden edition or whatever, but for some reason each rendition has something holding it back. If you've ever heard of the saying 1 step forward but 2 steps back, this more represents 1 step forward but another step back, because with each new great feature comes a different problem. Now, if you're still interested after hearing that chaotic intro, then join me in discussing each version of the game one by one and see where it all went wrong. And if it wasn't obvious already, spoilers incoming. The original Persona 3 is the only P3 that I have never played myself, but with good reason. It just has a better version with better visuals, more personas, and an epilogue, so I think it's safe to say that this is just the worst version of them all. I never really felt bad about never touching this game, since I kind of viewed it more as a beta version of what the game will eventually become. The blueprint that started it all and all of that, but there really isn't that much to discuss here, so let's just go on to the next one.
君はね確かにあの時私のそばにいたいつだっていつだっていつだってすぐ横で笑っていたなくしても取り戻す君を I will never leave you
FES is the version that I was talking about before. It's the standard re-release version of Atlus. If you didn't know, Atlus likes to do this thing of releasing a Persona game and then a couple of years later, releasing the actual definitive version of the game. This definitive version is always just a better version of what came before it, with new content, better graphics, more combat, and much more. We see this with Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5 Royale, which are just far superior versions of the game. FES was basically the first re-release of modern Persona. It retained the original spirit within it. The mood, music, story, and mechanics were all carried over, but unfortunately, so did all of its flaws. It's just a shinier version of Persona 3, and for the longest time, this has been the definitive way of experiencing Persona 3. The reason as to why that title doesn't really hold that much truth anymore comes in two forms. The first one is that it has aged. Some OG fans will try to convince you that it hasn't, but I swear it's aged a lot. You can't play this version anymore if you don't want to emulate it, and even when you do, the visuals without HD mods forces you to squint really hard to find the details of the game. The combat is also really difficult to tolerate now too, especially because we now have better Persona combat mechanics to serve as reference now. It might be easy to say just don't compare it, it's a far older game, but you don't really control how you feel when dated graphics and mechanics that were meant to be viewed on a CRT is right in front of your face. Sure, the command system is a novel idea, but without great execution, it falls on its face. Some people would say that this version is fine and didn't need a remake to begin with, but I would disagree. You only really have this opinion because, for some weird reason, there hasn't been a remake that's overwhelmingly accepted to be a better version of it. So many people said the same thing with Resident Evil 2. When the remake was announced, a lot of people expressed their doubt and said that it was already special in its own way and didn't need this makeover, and that was until it actually got a good remake. And now, the second reason why this title doesn't hold true anymore comes from the multiple versions of the game that came after this specific one. And one of them specifically went for a different vision. This is where things get very interesting. Persona 3 Portable is a PSP port of Persona 3 FES, and I think it's a pretty unanimous consensus that overall, this one is a worse version of FES. Because of the hardware limitations of the PSP, there are no animated cutscenes, no free roaming outside of Tartarus, and no models to see the characters in. What we got instead is a visual novel version of P3. All of the cutscenes are replaced with screenshots from the animated ones, and character models are replaced by character portraits instead, and that was kinda it. But why is this part of the contention then if it's just a worse version of what came before it? Well, that's because this fixed a major flaw of the original game and added a different protagonist. The combat of Persona 3 FES is the most different in all of the modern Persona games. This is because you can't really control your party members. It resembles something more like Star Ocean, but at the very least in that one, you can still control them in the press of a button. In FES, you straight up just couldn't. If this was better implemented, then it would have been the most interesting combat system in the whole entire franchise, but instead, it's the most frustrating one. You die so many times even though it's never your fault. The AI can't handle holding a spoon against a single shadow here. There just aren't enough customizations with your party commands, so when you get a bad stat roll, you're kinda just screwed. There's a reason why Marin Karen is the biggest meme that came out of this game. I remember being forced to be a support at the final stage of the game because Yukari just refused to heal us. Portable didn't have any of these problems because it managed to change this ambitious mess into a more traditional turn-based combat system where you actually get to control all of your party members. Now, do I think that this change made the combat more boring? Yes. Would improving the AI be a better solution? Yes, I think so too. But was what we got serviceable and led to a more fun experience? Absolutely. I understand that RNG is unavoidable in turn-based combat, but not having the ability to heal or guard when the enemy is gonna hit hard the next turn is a joke. Another point for Portable is that it introduces FemMC. This is the only Persona game so far where you can choose a different protagonist, and the changes are actually substantial. Different music, different social links, and an overall different feel. It feels like a different route and a breath of fresh air. The passionate fans of the female protagonist have even transcended Portable since they have been hard at work at modding FemMC into Reload. It's insane how dedicated the people in this community really are, because this actually looks incredible. From the art to the model to even the music of the game changing to fit the FemMC feel, and the best part of it is that it looks amazing. Check them out if you can, link in the description. These 2 points alone would have been enough to bring up a fight against Fez as the definitive version of the game, but Portable was also the first Persona 3 game to be released in Steam, making it the official way of playing it for the majority audience at the time. Now, even though the contention between the two existed, the answer was still pretty clear that Fez was still the overall better experience, especially when you consider that one line of code can be changed in Fez so that you can make the party members actually playable. And if you're already planning on playing Fez in the first place, you're probably doing this too, along with installing a lot of HD mods. But for over 11 years, with bated breath, the community whispered, "Atlas, can Persona 3 have a remake again? It's pretty old, awfully dated, and compared to its shiny counterparts, it's... oh wait, we're here now." Well, let's talk about it. Persona 3 Reload released, and immediately you can see that a lot of people weren't happy with it. But funny enough, a lot of people were also in love with it. I swear, this stayed at an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam, even with how badly the DLC was received. And for Steam, that's impressive. Persona 3 Reload is an adaptation of Persona 3 Fez, but with the guidance of Persona 5 Royal. Because of Persona 5's influence, it is by far the shiniest Persona game of them all. The menus, the graphics, the cinematics, it was all so shiny. But those shiny parts also make the rusty ones glaringly obvious. This might be an adaptation of Fez, but with all adaptations, it misses a lot of things. Those things might seem insignificant at first, but as more and more of them pile up, it becomes incredibly impactful to the user experience. The mood of all the cutscenes were changed. Fez had this overbearing feeling with all of the cutscenes, like something was wrong and it was just plain unsettling. But Reload takes a more straightforward approach of showing these scenes. This, of course, removes a lot of the mood and tension of the old scenes. It felt like there was something lost in translation. The first awakening scene was so different that the meaning behind it changed with the mood. In the Fez version, because of the tension and intensity of the scene with the abrupt cuts and the overbearing atmosphere, it looked like the main character stared into the abyss. And the abyss stared back, giving him the salvation that he needed to overcome the shadow. His hesitation to pick up the evoker and use it was felt. The urge to use it was creepy, like, look at this. Persona. Then you had Reload that made it look like he wanted to scream. For people who are experiencing Persona 3 for the first time through Reload, then this scene really wouldn't feel that much off. But as a longtime viewer, you can't help but have this jarring feeling whenever you're seeing these scenes. We can actually see more of this in the very beginning. When you look at the two opening scenes side by side, you just see how different it feels.
to my head. And then pull the trigger. Come on. There's no way I can't!
Are you serious? You didn't know? You're an idiot. Yeah, I'm at the station right now.
Can you see how different these two versions portrayed the same scene? Fez had this overbearing feeling that I was talking about earlier. Something is wrong, but we just don't know it yet. The style carries this intro so hard, and that's what an introduction should do. It should set the mood for what's to come. But in Reload, it looks a lot cleaner now, but clean doesn't always mean great. It's like the 60 frames per second versus the 24 frames per second of Into the Spider-Verse. One technically looks smoother, but the other one looks really freaking amazing. A lot of the remixes of the old songs also feel a bit off to me. Mass Destruction is the most popular punching bag here, but I'd say that what bothered me more was Burn My Dread and the Battle Hymn. I can't explain it since I'm not a music expert, but it's a lot softer in Reload. It doesn't hit as hard as the older ones, and it made the ending a lot worse for me, sadly. To me, the Nyx fight and the sacrifice scene were probably the best part of Persona 3 by far, and the music for me played the biggest part in those scenes. The remixes lost so much hype, and I can't really explain why. I hope someone could share their thoughts in the comments, because I really stumped about this one. And here's the thing, if Reload wanted to do its own thing and deviate from Fez and Portable, then that would have been great. But I don't think this game deviated enough for it to be called its own thing. At the very least, Portable gave us an entirely new perspective, and I can't say that Reload did something as grand as that one. This is especially a problem because Reload also retains all of the flaws that the older versions have when it decided to half-ass its own changes. Persona 3 has the best social links in all of the Persona games, but it also has the worst of them all too. This has the best moments of all of the games in the franchise, but it also has the worst ones too. This game is the epitome of the highs and the lowest of the lows. Akinari, Mutatsu, Yukari, Mitsuru are extremely good social links. They're part of my favorite ones in the whole entire franchise, but Kenji, Nozomi, and Kaz, I swear they're the most boring ones out there. Yuko would be a part of that list too, but I think her voice actress elevated her social link by a lot. So even though this is a reload thing, I post excluded her from this example. This game had the most interesting main cast of characters out of all of the Persona games. This gang has conflicts with each other because they actually have things that they believe in, and they have actual flaws, and they aren't just walking plot points. Junpei is the best written character in modern Persona, and it's not even close. This guy is complicated. He might not be the most likable Persona pal, but that's the point. You're supposed to feel irritated when he does something wrong because he grows from that. A lot of the Persona pals here are the same. They have so much going on with their lives that make them flawed, but flaws don't make characters bad. It elevates them. But for some reason, they all feel so disconnected. None of them feel like good friends, and that's crazy considering that they all live in the same building compared to other Persona games. This would have been fine if that was the concept of the whole game, if that was intentional, but the game will always make it seem like everyone is really close friends. And every time that happens, I'm always weirded out, thinking that I don't think this scene feels earned. This is especially the case at the very end of the game, where our main character sacrifices himself for his friends. Some of the characters might seem closer now, but as a group, that's never really the case. And you see, the issue here is that all of these problems still exist in Reload. It tried to answer some problems, but not all of them. It changed enough to deviate from Fez and Portable, but not enough to be its own thing. It exists in this limbo that no other Persona game lives in. But with all of these issues, why is it still considered as a contender for a definitive version? Well, that's because Reload doesn't miss all of its shots for additions. All of them actually hits. Now, contrary to popular belief, I don't think Reload is a cash grab because it was so obvious that the people who made this game actually care a lot. Like, look at how much life was put into this game. There are so many details with the characters and their activities that make it feel like they actually exist outside the main character's life. Look at Yukari eating Pocky, Junpei eating or playing or doing whatever, and then Mitsuru's just reading in the corner. And these details don't stop with just the characters. Look at the setting. The school brims with so much life. The trashy setting of Nyx getting nearer and nearer is more felt. And if you follow all the devices that should have electricity, you'd see that all of them are connected to some power outlet. This is just insane detail to me. I spent minutes trying to look for a device in the dorm and just following its respective outlet. This is the shiny tint that I was talking about before. This game looks gorgeous, down to the minute details of the menus. Like someone even made a whole ass video about these menus. I have a feeling that the team was just afraid of changing too much since they aren't really the OG team that made the original Persona 3. They might have just not wanted to make unnecessary risk when the blueprint was already very successful, but hey, that's just my theory. And when I said that they didn't miss their shots for additions, it might seem like a contradiction. They missed a lot when it comes to the cutscenes, the mood, and even the music, so what gives? Well, I'd say that those were changes to what they made for the adaptation, but when it comes to the things that they added, they hit all of their shots. The linked episodes were Reload's solution to Fez's problem of not having social links for the male party members, and I think they're all better than most of the social links in the whole franchise. It was actually jarring to see how much better these scenes are written compared to the social links. It was longer, more substantial, and had more weight. It actually felt like something was happening every single time I went through with these linked episodes. Most of the time in these social links, it feels like it was originally one long cutscene but was cut into 10 different interactions to fit the time slots. There were so many moments where I said out loud, "That was it?" after an interaction, and this isn't just a Reload problem, by the way. A lot of the social links in the franchise felt like this. Most of them don't feel earned because of how short each meeting was. That's why whenever I play them, I judge them as a whole and not by parts. This makes the social link feel better in my head somehow. 10 meetings of one social link never guaranteed a good experience, but every linked episode promised a character arc and delivered every single time. Junpei and Aragaki shined a lot during these episodes, and even though they had a smaller number of episodes, I felt like I knew them more than Fuka, and I maxed her social link. If this is what Persona 6 is going to look like, then I'm excited for what Atlus is cooking up in their studio. The addition of hanging out with your friends outside social links, linked episodes, and the plot were Reload's attempt to make these friends feel closer. And although they didn't succeed in that endeavor, it did make it so that there were more things to do at night. Fez had a problem of not having enough nighttime activities, so at some point you were either just sleeping every night or leveling up your Persona stats at the arcade. This was really boring to do, but with these hangouts, the problem got alleviated a bit. Don't get me wrong, there were still a lot of boring nights, but at the very least, there was still more to do here. I complained earlier about Reload's attempt to capture the original soundtrack's hype, but I think that they redeemed themselves by adding the best pieces of music in the whole franchise. Color in Your Night and It's Going Down Now are my favorite Persona tracks, and it's not even close. I might like more Persona 5 music in quantity, and Persona 4's music might seem more nostalgic, but these two pieces of music are what make my body move the most. All of the social links in Reload have voices, and it elevated all of the social links for me. Yuko in particular got so much character baked into her all of a sudden that she wasn't as boring as the previous renditions of her character. I'd argue that even Nozomi's voice existing made his character better for me and less annoying. This is also by far the hardest modern Persona game. I actually had to observe the enemy attack patterns and use guard in this one. This hard fight had me on the ropes for the whole encounter because I only had 2 revival beads, had Mitsuru on the party, and forgot to save. So in Merciless mode, it was either I survive with an underleveled party and 2 revival beads, or replay the game for 5 hours. I think you know which option I picked. Of course, this game does become a lot easier once you get that one physical theurgy, but still, this is the hardest one of them all in a good way. I actually had to use the mechanics that the game provides me instead of brute forcing it like what I did in Persona 5 and 4. I know that some people would try to refute this in 2 ways. One is that it was never difficult to begin with. Play an SMT game and you'll know what difficult means, and to that, I say that any other game is easier compared to that franchise. That's a game where insta-kill skills are matters of life and death, unlike in Persona where it's just fun and gambling. The second argument is that Fez was a lot harder than Reload, and technically, I would agree, but that's only as true as saying that Unfair Mario is the most difficult platformer. It's true, but only because it was never a fair game to begin with. The difficulty comes from not knowing instead of player skill. But I'd say that Reload is the most difficult in a fair way. When you lose in Reload, it's because you didn't prepare enough resources, you didn't observe the enemy's moveset, or you missed and got ambushed. Most of the time, the fault lies with the player, and I think that's how it should be. The opposite goes for Fez, in that your party members would always feel like they have status ailments, and that you're always wishing for that Hail Mary every turn. Most of my losses in Fez were because Yukari refused to heal us, or that Mitsuru used Marin Karin instead of Bufu. I remember that in my final fight against Nyx, I had to be the healer of the party because of how unreliable Yukari was. Of course, all of my problems could have been solved with over-leveling in Fez, but I digress. So now, can you see how difficult it is to have a definitive version of this game? Persona 3 Fez had the story and mood done the best, but it's pretty dated now. Its availability is also an issue since you can only experience it through emulation now. Persona 3 Portable is the most accessible one out there. It's the cheapest version too that is legally playable. It also contains the story, mood, and the music of the original Spirit, and has the second perspective that adds a lot of replayability to the game, but with its presentation, it's the weakest of them all. It looks worse than the OG Persona 3, and that says a lot. It reads more like a book than an actual game, but maybe for some people that's for the best, because this has the best depiction of Shinji Ichidori's death in all of the game's versions. And finally, Persona 3 Reload feels the least like the original Persona 3 Spirit, but has the quality of life updates, the shiny features, and the additions that hit where it counted. It's also the most attractive Persona 3 game to play since it's the newest one. This race is already incredibly contentious, and I haven't even mentioned the anime yet. The anime was made in between Portable and Reload's release, and to be honest, It fixes a lot of my narrative problems with Persona 3 and even the Persona franchise. The main character of the movies is the same Yuki Makoto in the games, but he isn't a silent protagonist here. The Makoto in this adaptation is an actual character. He has a personality and even gets his own development later down the line. And you know how the games allude that the main character doesn't really care about anything? Well, this adaptation straight up shows you that he doesn't care at all, but his change from not caring to having the urgency to sacrifice his life for his friends actually comes across here. His relationship with Ryoji was so much more relevant here too. Ryoji was the catalyst that made Makoto truly start to care about the world. This is the only Makoto that I can buy that actually had a friend. This relationship and development made the scene where Ryoji reveals that he's the next avatar even more heartbreaking, and this is after playing 2 versions of the game already. It just goes to show how much better a Persona game would be if it actually had a non-silent protagonist, but that's a conversation for another day. These movies also fix my pet peeves when it comes to all of the Persona games, which is, where are the rest of the characters? We actually see everyone fighting on the screen and not just 4 people. I understand that gameplay-wise, this is a non-issue since we can't have all characters fight all at once. This isn't Total War. But pet peeves aside, what it actually fixes are the plot scenes that should have had characters doing something but didn't. Take for example, Chidori's death. In all of the 4 games, excluding maybe Portable, while this emotional scene was happening, Strega is still there! Like what? Are they just waiting for them to finish their emotional goodbye out of courtesy? Like what happened here? This is honestly the most frustrating parts when it comes to the original games, because it removes so much from the scene, I can't even express it enough. And to make things worse, after the scene does end, why are all of Junpei's friends just standing at the back? This made me think that Makoto should have been the only one to have gone for Junpei, because what was the point of having all of these people watch at the back doing nothing? Like, were they just there to say Junpei's name very sadly when Chidori's actually dying? I swear, this was such a waste of a good scene. But you know what? The anime actually fixes these issues. That is why this is the best adaptation of Chidori's death for me. It felt like the best when it comes to the scene actually making sense and being felt. And the beauty of the anime is that most of the scenes that needed tweaking actually got that treatment. This is what Reload should have done, make substantial changes to the original but with the same care and attention they placed into the shiny features of Reload. But the reason why no one really discusses the Persona 3 anime is because it's not really a good anime adaptation. This Persona 3 felt confused. It never really felt like a cohesive movie. The calendar system was what made modern Persona stand out, but it worked against this because the calendar was made to facilitate player choice. In this movie, it felt like a reminder that this was just a sloppy video game adaptation. This calendar felt so out of place that every time it came up, I was just like, man, if you didn't play the games, this would be so confusing, and that alone is a signal that this is a bad adaptation. Everything feels fast. That might seem like a blessing if you really didn't like Persona's slow pacing, but it's really fast. Like, you don't even feel the months go by. Other than Ryoji and Yuki, none of the other characters were adapted right because it was just that fast. Junpei and Chidori might have the best ending here, but they also felt the least developed in this version. I mean, imagine cramming the final fight against the 12th Shadow, Ikutsuki's betrayal, Ryoji's introduction, Junpei and Chidori's romance, Yuki and Ryoji's bromance, Chidori's death, and finally the Nyx reveal into just an hour and 30 minutes. That's like cramming in a whole new level. I'm actually really impressed at how much this movie crammed into that small time frame. But regardless of what the anime's quality really was overall, you can't deny that it added value to the Persona 3 experience. It even answered the question of where the heck is Koromaru during the crucifixion scene. But anyway, this is a confusing series of games, and its mess is rooted in how much it lacked hindsight, even with hindsight being readily available for it. It had 12 years after Portable's release, and even more since Faz, so it was really weird how Reload ended up up not meeting so many expectations at this point. And if you noticed, Reload had the most amount of discussion in the whole video. And that's because Reload was supposed to be the definitive version, the ultimate Persona 3, but instead it muddied the waters even more. This is why I said that Persona 3 is only the best Persona game if I had all the games and movies in mind. Every version of Persona 3 fixed problems of each other, making this a Frankenstein of a game inside my head. But to this day, I can still remember the hype I felt during the final fight with Nyx, and the emotional impact that final seal left ingrained into my memory. And that did more to me than most games I've played. Thanks for watching. See ya.